I a hero?
Am I a hero?
Am I a hero?
Am I a hero?
We're here to challenge your definition of a hero.
All right, folks. Welcome back to another episode. This is an interesting case study, I would say. Ankur has jumped in and talked to some people that have really taken a very strong position to put their values on the line and make an impact in the world with their lifestyle. Ankur, what can you tell us by way of a setup of this conversation you've had with these two very interesting people?
What's really stuck with me more than anything is the connection, Kory and Michelle, the people I interviewed, between spirituality and farming, or meditation and farming, and how they set up their whole agricultural project as a means to a spiritual end. So that's how they really structure their life. They're not making this distinction between what do I do as a vocation versus what am I searching for spiritually. They're aligning those two things and saying, how can I act in my everyday life, interact with the economy, interact with society, serve my community's needs, and have all of that be reinforcing and guiding me towards how I want to grow as a person.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because I don't know if you feel this way. I've certainly talked to many other people that feel this way, but sometimes we can end up at such odds with our values and trying to find, for instance, reconciling our spiritual inquiry with our political activism, for instance, can be very difficult. How can I be on this path of unity and at the same time I see very clearly I need to make this impact or make this change or fight some force? And I thought it was so interesting when she spoke to her past as a political activist and her association with these anarchists, and what she found in this act of her lifestyle of living, what you point out is living in accordance with this right livelihood or right action, and how all of that can be nested into a single act. And I think if there's anything for our listener to really take away, I just encourage them to zero in on this, that these folks have found a way to nest their values in such an integrated and coherent way.
Yeah, and if I can rephrase that as a challenge or as a question, they're presenting their answer to it. Yeah. And we can ask the listeners, how does this let me think how I want to say this. They're presenting their answer, but how does that fly with the listener? Like, is living in a remote farm in Quebec the best form of political activism we can do? Right. Is it better than engaging directly with the political process or the non-governmental process or the throwing bricks at windows process or the, all the different ways that we choose to bring our values into society? This is one option. They're presenting it as a good option. I like it.
Frame your reframe. And then the listener would maybe just think, what would it be for them?
Yeah.
Some point on the landscape of action and what's available that can create this Venn diagram of reconciling some of your values, how you live, act, make food, get money. But I think this is a really wonderful aspect to take away and something for all of us to contemplate.
Yeah, and ultimately, that's what we're trying to investigate, on this podcast, 10,000 Heroes. What is each one of our definitions of heroism? Because that's one way of analyzing is, how do we make all of these currents flow together? Both what we want personally, what we owe to society, how we interact with others, how each one of us shapes that is our definition of heroism.
Awesomely said. Okay, let's jump in. Let's let them listen.
I'd like to welcome my guests today, Kory Goldberg and Michelle Decary. Did I get that pronounced correctly?
Yeah, Decary.
Decary, wonderful. And Kory and Michelle are currently farming in Quebec after kind of an illustrious history of doing all kinds of other things, including meditation and pilgrimage. But I wanted to start this interview reading something off of their website that I thought was so beautiful. The farm's primary aim is to support each other in our spiritual development. We are a hopeful, imaginative, and empowering response to modern socioecological challenges. Our farm is a site of ongoing holistic inquiry with the aim to live mindfully, compassionately, ethically, resourcefully, creatively, and simply. And I just love that so much. It took the words out of my mouth, which is like, why are you farming? So now I know. But I'm still curious, kind of, why did you decide, or how did you decide that small scale agriculture was the best way to support your spiritual development?
So I'm mostly the one who takes care of the farm. Kory has enough farm jobs, so I'll answer that. Maybe I'll answer more of the farming questions, and Kory will answer more of the, I don't know, spiritual Buddhism questions. But I don't know, during my bachelor's degree, I hung out a lot with anarchists, and there was a lot of anger and a lot of, I don't know, dissatisfaction with the world and a lot of criticism. But then again, these anarchists were, smoking their export cigarettes as they were singing "Smash the State." And I don't know, I got disillusioned from the whole scene. For me, I just wondered, like, what's the greatest impact I can have on Earth, where I can leave a positive imprint. So many times in the environmental movement, I find that we tend to demonize human impact. But I think, as the natives here in North America have shown, you can have a positive impact on your environment. So I wanted to start really small. We spent a year in 2004, well, a season in 2004, learning farming on a farm here in Quebec. And then I worked for 2 years on another farm, which was much smaller scale, no tractor, hand tools, delivering to the local community. And I felt, this is a model I'd really like to have at our place. And then, so we started really small, and it's just grown organically from there. But I've always wanted to nourish my community. And, it's a way to stay at home. When the kids were small, I was always at home. And so it was a good balance for all our goals.
Yeah, and nourishing your community, that definitely seems like farming is a fantastic way to do that.
After that first year of farming at La Terre Bleue, the Blue Earth, it was a much larger farm. It was a bioextensive farm. They fed about 150 families and a small market, but there were tractors, and we were just beat. At the end of every day, we were just so exhausted, and we both told ourselves, we never want to do this commercially. And but the year after we worked there, we went back to India for a few months, where we traveled and we did some research and we worked on our pilgrimage guidebook. And then when we came back, we got a job at a retreat center, and our primary task responsibility was to take care of the garden. It was a tiny garden. It was like a quarter of an acre. And it was that experience where I felt, it was all hand tools. There were no tractors. It was just a few beds. The food was just for the family who was living, who owned the retreat center, and the guests who were coming there. And that seemed a lot more realistic. And, we felt really good, not beat up all the time. So.
Then again, I was, trying to maintain balance. So as Kory said, we were finishing the book, and, if Kory was working in the garden in the morning, then I was doing editing on the book, and then we'd have lunch, and then we'd switch off, and I'd go in the garden and he'd work on the book. So we got that balance of, mental stimulation and then physical exertion.
And having our hands in the soil to really discharge all the, tension from being in front of a computer.
Yeah, I want to get you to say more about that. I have some background in farming, and I can relate physically, even when you say that. I know what that experience feels like in my body and my mind. But for those people who are listening who do not, how is it that getting your hands literally in the dirt, using much less efficient hand tools instead of tractors, how is it that that helps us?
I have a theory. I'd wish someone would study it scientifically, but I feel like when you have an overflow of electrons in your body, and then you put your hands in the earth, it's like it grounds you, literally. Um, that's what I feel, and I really do feel that there's a therapeutic aspect to farming. I call it plant therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you're like,
Yeah, no, same thing. But I feel the same as Michelle. But I would say hand tools are not always less efficient than tractors. You know, an example I like to give is we were visiting an organic farm, a bioextensive organic farm, and in their bed of carrots, in their one bed of carrots, they just had a single row. Okay, they had 100-foot long bed because they can only have a single row because the whole bed and the aisles between the beds are all designed for the tractor. Whereas in our bed, we can have 5 rows of carrots for the same length of bed.
mm-hmm.
So in some ways, it's debatable on the efficiency of hand tools versus tractors.
Yeah. And what scale are you? The website says 14 acres. Is that still what you're doing right now, or?
14 acres is our land, but about 8 or 9 acres is forest, mostly maple sugar bush behind the house. And then we're doing biointensive farming on half an acre. So on that we feed 40 or 50 families. And then we have 1 acre of forest garden. So in the forest garden, there's, all the berries. So raspberry, blueberry, strawberry and gooseberries and
black currants, red currants, white currants, pink currants.
And then we have, nut trees and fruit trees. And so all that's on 1 acre.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, I'm going to try and go back to my first question, because everything you're saying, I mean, I can feel it. I've had that experience of the extra mental energy that a lot of us carry around, getting grounded by work in the dirt. Obviously, your description of the variety of plants is making me salivate and want to come visit and sample. But especially as people who are interested in meditation and have written a guidebook on pilgrimage to different sites connected with the life of the Buddha, how does this interact? How does the farming work interact with your spiritual path?
Well, we find that, as we were saying before, just the discharge of tension, but being outside, we try to take the gardening work as a form of meditation, a sort of a mindfulness in movement. And when you're outside in nature and your hands are on the ground or you're tending plants and you can, you're paying attention to the relationship that you're having with the plants, but you're also feeling the heat on your body or the rain on your body, paying attention to the wind. And just when you're quiet and you're working outside like that, it just allows for a certain kind of connection with nature that I don't necessarily feel in other instances. If I'm playing, soccer or some other sport outside, or in the winter we go skiing, it's nice as well. But it's for me, when I'm in the garden and I'm working with plants, it just has a really strong meditative component.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And okay, so then I'm curious, as people who are, writing about the Buddha, one of the first things that comes to mind when you talk about farming and the Buddha is right livelihood. So how has that concept been operating in your life, or is this part of a kind of a vision of right livelihood for you?
Oh,
Definitely.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a teacher. My primary task off the farm is teaching at the college level. I'm in the humanities department where I teach courses at Champlain College in sustainability and ethics. And so that's part of right livelihood. And then the growing food is also right livelihood, because we're doing so in a way that is not poisoning the land. We're not dumping tons of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides in the ground. We're building up soil. We're improving the quality of soil through our raised beds, giving life to, contributing to the life of the soil and all the microorganisms that inhabit the soil. So, through our low tech, low impact way of gardening, I feel is definitely in line with right livelihood. You want to add anything?
Well, also it's reducing harm, so eating locally. So I totally agree with Kory on the organic part, and I would like to add eating locally, diminishing the footprint of the travel of your food definitely has an impact. And environmentally, I would say that our farming practices sequester carbon. So by planting trees, of course, but even by a no-till approach, the soil can store a lot of carbon. So I just feel like it's beneficial all around. And we took it was a monoculture Christmas tree plantation when we bought the farm here. But the people who had planted it had planted the trees about 4 feet apart, and they were 22 to 25 years old. So they were very spindly, very straight up. And that plantation was suffocating. And we had a forestry engineer come and assess the situation. And he said, this is going to die in 10 years, within 10 years. So we thought, okay, what do we do? So we started, cutting. And as soon as you'd cut a couple of trees, all the others would fall down because they were all supporting each other. So it was a long process, but I do feel like we rehabilitated the land because actually they were so close together that there was no life, there was no biodiversity at all. No bugs, no birds, no weeds even. So by taking that land, it took a few years to cut down the trees, but we then we dug some ponds, and then the amphibians came, and then we planted flowers. So we have a flowering calendar throughout the season to keep the pollinators on site, and then the birds show up, and it's just so diverse. It's really like a sanctuary.
It was amazing to see once we cleared enough space and we dug a pond, we started to get water right away. And that first evening, there were already frogs. It's like they just sort of magically appeared out of nowhere.
They were
one night, one night, it's silent, and then the next night it's just a whole symphony of frogs. So, and I would add another aspect of the right livelihood is the human connection that we develop with our community, with the people, the members who buy the veggies from us. We get to know who we're feeding, and the people, the consumers, the members, they get to know their family farmer. And every week when they come and pick up their veggies, it's always such a festive occasion. We have great conversations with people. It's a really wonderful opportunity to connect with people, so many people, even just for a couple of minutes. Look into each other's eyes and say, they say thank you, we say thank you, and there's just a lot of love that's generated. Whereas I think in most trades, you don't get to see so many people who you're offering this really nice service to, and there's so much gratitude. People are always so happy with what they receive, and so they feel good, we feel good. So there's a lot of this what we call metta, love and kindness. A lot of this is being developed.
Wow, that's beautiful, and for me that speaks directly to what Michelle was saying at the outset about being involved in a protest movement that wanted to change the world for the better, but was fraught with distress or negative energy. You're cultivating changing the world in the way that you want it to be changed, but with it's just infused with gratitude and connection and love.
And we really see this. I'm lucky that in my course on sustainability called Knowledge, Society, and the Environment, each session I bring a group of students to the farm for the day. So they take a school bus over and they come, and a lot of these kids have hardly spent any time in the country. So it's a real outing for them. And they come to the country, and they're always a little bit nervous at first, but then you could just see their shoulders start to relax and their faces start to relax, and they just become nature has a real beneficial impact on them. And as we're walking around the garden and walking around the forest, and I'm pointing things out, or Michelle's pointing things out, and we're speaking about the different relationships between the plants and the trees, and we talk about some of the insects and the birds and all this. And it's just watching their eyes light up. So for example, if we pass a patch of bergamot flowers, I offer each student, well, pluck a petal and suck out the nectar. And it's so divine. It's so subtle, but they connect with it. And there's always a couple of kids who just find that a little bit too weird. But for the most part, they really love it. And then after a short picnic lunch, we actually put them to work for a couple of hours, so that there's an experiential learning component to it, and they just have such a wonderful time, getting their hands in the dirt. And speaking of the discharge, they're coming from the city where they have very little contact with nature other than maybe walking through a park. So to put their hands in the soil after all the sort of electromagnetic, pollution from the city is really powerful for them. And I get emails from students, a semester later, a year later, 5 years later, who really thank me for that course in particular, that they express how transformative the course was for them, and especially the day of coming to the farm, because it's just their whole worldview opened up.
Yeah,
Well,
it's all.
yeah, sorry. I think to answer one of your previous questions is one of the reasons we did start the farm is to be a model, to be emulated. And so if people see that that's possible, then maybe they'll be inspired to start. And that also goes for the interns that we have every year here. We usually have about 4 or 5 young people who are interested in alternative sustainable agriculture, who come for 1-2 months or a season to learn. And then a lot of them have gone on to start up their own farms
or homesteads. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to say, we've had experience, like, Michelle worked at La Cralinette, and we worked at this other farm in India. We visited meditation centers and ashrams. I worked, in West Coast, California. So we've had the opportunity to visit other communities, other homesteads, other farms. Even traveling in India, we got to spend a lot of time in some villages in the Himalayas, where it wasn't necessarily an intentional community, but it was a tight-knit community. So there's one family that, I've been visiting them for 20 years now. And I would spend 2-3 months at a time with them and helping them in their garden and learning that kind of life. Because I grew up in the suburbs and had no exposure to that. But I started traveling to India when I was 19. And this one family, for example, took me in. And so I helped them with the garden and growing various crops, and mostly garlic and corn and spinach and peas and beans and dal and things like this. And I thought to myself, okay, when I'm older and I have a piece of land, I also want to have a place where I could welcome young people to learn, to have the same opportunity that I did when I was younger.
That's beautiful. Just passing that gift on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I have a few more questions about this. God, there's so many things to explore. But one, that sense after your first year of farming together at that larger scale, probably still a small farm comparatively, but when you were so tired and now you're like, okay, we didn't quite want to do it like that. Now you're many years, 15 years in, perhaps to this project. How do you feel in terms of, have you calibrated the physical work to suit your bodies, or is it sometimes still like, oh, farming is too much work?
If you had asked me last week, I would have said it was too much. But last week was the busiest week of the season, where we also sell seedlings, so everybody was coming to pick up their seedlings, and then we were doing a lot of transplanting and then moving the greenhouse tunnels and all that. But I'd say that we've definitely found a balance. When we first started out, Kory was actually finishing his PhD. We were trying to get the book published. I had just given birth. We had so our daughter was just born and our son was 3. And then I started this farm. It was really completely nuts. Not recommended.
And we bought the property, so there's mortgage payments and repairs.
Yeah. But so that first year where we had to build the greenhouse and had to dig a pond and get the irrigation system set up and at the same time as you're trying to start seedlings and work on the soil, that was pretty intense. But as the years have gone on, now we're in our 12th year of actual growing. So there was 1 year of prep before that. So you could say 13 years. We really have found like our comfortable speed, where we do some tweaking here and there of things that we want to, constantly improve. But mostly we know what works, and we just kind of try to stick to that. And so there's none of this having to reinvent the wheel every year. All of the infrastructure is there, the cold room and the washing station. And so in your first years, you're trying to get all that set up at the same time as you're trying to grow food. When I turned 40 5 years ago, I really thought, okay, our 30s were crazy. We were really in this like creative energy and really like planting roots and, just sowing and working. And now I was like, okay, I've done 10 years of that. Can we start harvesting? Can all that work that we put into the soil come back to us? And it really changed my attitude. But the more I do it, the more I realize how beneficial it is for me, because it keeps me supple, it keeps me strong. I'm outside all the time. When I spend time on the computer in the winter, because we live in Quebec, we have pretty rough winters, so we have a few months where we don't have any hands-on work. There's some administrative work to do, but I spent so much time in front of a computer. I can't wait for this season to start so I can actually go outside. And there's nothing better than going in the greenhouse and, wearing a tank top when there's actually 2 feet of snow outside. It's a really good feeling.
Yeah. Beautiful.
We should also say, actually, that first year when we worked on that bio-extensive farm and we were exhausted all the time, there's a context to that. We had just spent 2.5 years traveling in India, doing a lot of intensive meditation and yoga, but a lot of meditation. So actually, we had just finished sitting a 45-day silent retreat where we were meditating, 12, 14 hours a day. And then we went to go work on this farm. So we showed up at the farm, we were eating very little because we weren't doing much physical activity. So we probably weren't in the greatest physical shape. And that also contributed to the toughness of the experience.
Yeah.
Whereas now, realistically, did we really work hard? I think in some ways we might even be working harder now because we have all these additional responsibilities. But, when Michelle was saying we found our rhythm, every morning we'll meditate for an hour. We'll try to do yoga for anywhere between 20 minutes and an hour, depending on what else is going on. And then we start our workday. So that keeps us fresh and keeps us invigorated and keeps us supple. So I think that's been a really big help as well. And then when our interns are into the same things that we're into, it becomes even more invigorating. So there's some years where several of the interns want to meditate or do yoga together. So for example, last year we did this, 3 month, yeah, what's it called? Like a 3 month yoga marathon. Every day we did this power yoga, and we were 5 of us doing it together, and so that really invigorated us and gave us lots of energy.
Yeah, the sangha. It's
Yeah,
it's powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. So then here's a question: as going back into agriculture has become a real movement again for young people in North America that I feel privileged to have been a part of and observed, and there's just so much to benefit from there. Tell me about, for people who are interested in that or listening, and the people you recommend, and your farm is perhaps a model. How does it work economically, or can it work economically? Because I've seen that lead to a lot of stress, a lot of despair for young farmers. Does it have to have an off-farm job where somebody's a professor, or is there a way to
depends on the scale?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kory has an off-farm job. So that farm where I worked, people in the States may know him. His name is Jean-Martin Fortier. He's known as the market gardener.
Mm-hmm.
And he's written a book, and it's sold quite well. So, their model is the same as here, except they're 10 times bigger than what we do. And so actually maybe 5 times now that we've doubled. Yeah, 5 times bigger than what we do. So they do work longer hours and they have a bigger team, but they manage to make a living solely from the farm. For us, I wanted to design my life so that I did have time for yoga and meditation. So we chose to keep it small. We started with the veggies, and then we had that extra 1 acre, and I knew I didn't want to do more veggies. So that's why we decided to do the forest garden and just diversify our production instead of doing more of the same thing. But we definitely never lost money. And so it's a good, I don't know if you want exact numbers, but
I mean, whatever you think will be helpful.
His argument is that a small scale farmer farming 2 acres can make $100,000 in sales.
That's like a dramatic and inspiring number for a small scale farmer.
Yeah. You can read his book. It's in there, and he offers these master classes. And some people have been quite successful in following his model. Other people have had a harder time. There's obviously many factors. I mean, basically on our half an acre, last year we had 36,000 Canadian in sales off half an acre. So
that's ahead of the curve for what he's saying, right?
Sure. I mean, we're also sometimes we hire people for very specific tasks, but generally we have woofers, worldwide opportunities on organic farms. So people are coming through woof. And so they give us 30 hours of work in exchange for room and board and education and the homestead experience. Could we do it if we didn't have that help? I think we'd probably need to hire at least one part-time person, and work much longer days. So it's possible, but also I'm working as a college professor, so that helps as well. But we know lots of farms like La Pralinette, where Jean-Martin and his wife Madeleine work. They're both on the farm full time. In fact, actually, Jean-Martin now is running another farm called the Quatre Temps. So Madeleine is running their farm La Pralinette full time, and they have 3 or 4 employees. So it's definitely possible. In Quebec, we tend to be a little bit luckier than in other places because we've had access to government grants. If you've done an agricultural program or you've studied environmental sciences, you get, I don't know what it is today, but then it
was like $20,000.
$20,000 each.
You can go up to 40,000.
And if you're 2, like they were 2 per person, so 40 and 40 is 80.
Wow.
Whereas for us, we didn't have any degrees in agriculture or environmental sciences, but we still did get a $10,000 grant two times we got two $10,000 grants from the government, which pretty much helped us set up all the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's huge for starting a farm. That's amazing.
Yeah, so there, it's not like that in every province. It's probably not like that in every state in the US. So obviously each place is different. The cost of the land, location is everything. So for example, here in Quebec, where we are right now, the prices have skyrocketed. Like if we tried to buy a piece of land now, I don't think we can afford it. But if you go north, the prices drop, 5 times. So it all, so there's so many factors involved.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. One thing that really stands out to me as I hear you kind of describe the tapestry of your lives, and I think about this, the podcast is called 10,000 Heroes. I think about this from the perspective that there's heroism in all these different walks of life, and we could all share and learn something about what it means to be heroic. I'm curious to see if this is intentional and how you bring awareness and adjust this. But I see a real care and attention to balance. Like you're balancing self-care, the economic component of how you interact with society, helping other people, nourishing them, feeding them, building community, all of these, working with your body, but not too much. All of these aspects of our lives, you put a lot of attention to, and it's not like one is just obliterating and dominating the other ones. Is that conscious on your part, and how do you maintain that?
Yeah, most definitely. I think you really captured it well. It's a life design. And, we set our priorities from the beginning, and then how can you meet those, how can we meet our values? How can we meet, all these little aspects that you just named?
Okay. So 15 years ago, before starting the farm, you had like a little joint visioning session and you outlined your values and came up with strategies about how to meet it. Was it that explicit? Or
it actually was, especially at the time we were shortly after we bought the property, two of our friends came to live with us. They lived in a yurt on the property 3 seasons. And then in the winters, at that time, they would travel in the winter or they'd move into the house and we would be traveling in the winter. So only our last winter together were we all in the house. But and the only reason they left was just because we couldn't get the proper zoning to build another house. They didn't want to live in the yurt anymore. They wanted to have kids and they wanted to move on. And we tried for about 2.5 years all these different ways to change the zoning and get the permits, and it just never worked. But it's fine. They actually just live about kilometers, a little bit more than half a mile down the road from us, and they've started their own project on a larger scale. But we're in constant contact. So the community is still there. They're just on a piece of land down the road. But we actually came together. It was after we read and did a workshop with Diana Leaf Christian. I'm not sure if you know who she is. She wrote a really well-known book called
Creating a Life Together.
Yes, Creating a Life Together. And she lives on an intentional community in the southeast United States. I don't remember where exactly. But she basically went all around North America and learning about the various intentional communities and saw what worked and what didn't. Because I think she said something like more than 90% of the intentional communities fail.
Sure.
And so we did a workshop with her around consensus decision making and community building. And one of the things that she taught us was that having a very clear outline of your values and your mission is key, because otherwise it's vague. You might be a group of people who all think they're on the same page when in fact their ideas are wildly different. So, we all say, yeah, we want to live in community, but community means one thing to me, another thing to this person, another thing to that person. So she really encouraged us and everyone who was in the workshop to jot down, okay, create a mission statement for your community. And we did that. The four of us did that. We all wrote our own mission statements. And then we came together, and we were actually almost all on the same page. And then we sort of tweaked it, talking about it. And it took us like a few, 2-3 sessions to get it down. And then we're like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And then, the details sort of came out over time.
But in that initial visioning, was there precision about, hey, we don't want to work more than 8 hours a day, or we're trying to get this amount of income versus this amount of scale? Did it talk about that
not
kind of
so
thing?
much in terms of working, not so much in terms of number crunching or hours per day, but actually the sentence that you read at the beginning of the interview that's from our mission statement, right?
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
And so we're really focusing on the key principles, because we know, okay, some days we need to put in a 12-hour day, and other days we're going to take off.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare that we do 12-hour days.
Yeah. But we've gone through long periods of time where we had to do that, especially with like writing projects and kids and farming and like the whole kit and caboodle. So as long as we stick to those principles and we're there to support each other, if I see Michelle is working too hard, I'm like, let's go take a bath. Let's go take a hot bath, relax, get out of the garden. Or if I'm spending too much time writing in front of the computer, Michelle's like, let's go for a walk. So we have each other as a support.
Oh yeah, even just hearing you say that, I feel so supported. Just hearing that, that's great. And one more thing about the right livelihood, I think for many years in my mind, it was like, how can I survive in the economy or interact in a healthy way with the economy without violating my ethical precepts or my standards? That was the nut I was trying to crack. And only recently I understood it on a different level, which is why the first line of your about page just struck me so much. Was it rather than my vocational, professional activity not being an impediment to my spiritual growth, the question is, how can that enable further spiritual growth, or how can that really catalyze the person who I want to be eventually, which seems like what you're doing.
I think it's so important to find meaning in what we do, because I know too many people who don't like their work and they spend all their extra time and money trying to divert their attention from, what they perceive as the drudgery of their work. And I don't feel like I need to escape my life. I'm just happy here. Like for the last year during this COVID, we feel so blessed. I just can't believe we're this lucky that we live, out in nature. I can work. It hasn't really changed. Kory's been working online, so that's changed for him. But for me, I don't have to wear a mask in the garden. I mean, I'm not social distancing from my plants. I mean, it's really, it hasn't really changed anything. And just, I think it's helped us be really resilient with what's going on in the world. Yeah, we're really happy here. Sometimes, of course, we like to go away and get a break from chicken duty and all that kind of, the things that keep you here. But most of the time, we're really grateful for what we've built.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me. I would be too. So, okay, just maybe shifting gears a little bit, because I know that you've written this book about pilgrimage, and that you mentioned kind of casually that you did a 45-day meditation retreat, which I'd be really remiss in not asking you questions about that. Let's say, how did those experiences Well, one, if there's anything in particular you want to share, I'd love to hear it. But maybe as a question, how did those experiences prepare you for what you're doing now, or how are they involved in what you're doing now?
I don't know where I'd be without meditation, without my practice. Those long courses that you just mentioned, or just that extensive time that we spent in India, for me personally, I don't know if it's the same for Kory, but developing equanimity. So, a kind of balanced mind facing all the outside or internal vicissitudes of life, especially having kids. I don't know how people parent without a meditation practice that helps them with their equanimity. I have no idea how I would have done it, or how I'd keep doing it now with teenagers. And just it's our grounding practice. It's our baseline. I don't know if you have something else to add to that.
Well, I'd love to get a little more detail just on that, because I think that's so, it's like it can be a total gift for everyone who's listening if we could just go a little bit more into that. So your teenager does something that would ordinarily make us flip out. What goes on in your mind and body in that moment? And then what do what's the pathway you take? How do you react or not react to that?
Okay, well, first disclaimer, we're not perfect. So
yeah, of course.
we often will we do react, but I think it's, even if we do react, it's for a lesser time and with less intensity. So I think already our kids benefit from that.
Yeah.
But so if they'll say something hurtful, usually I think I get to be a little bit more empathetic, because I've watched my mind so much that I'm really able to see where they're coming from, what's the underlying need that's not being expressed, but that's coming out in this particular behavior, and how can we address that need. I really do think that by watching our own minds, it helps us connect to all humans, because we're all the same. We all have these same crazy patterns inside. And so I do think through empathy, that's how we can better parent.
Okay, so I'm going to go even further, because I want to make this connection explicit. You said by watching your own mind, you can better understand what their needs are, or develop better empathy. So what's the connection? Is it that you can imagine, or you remember yourself saying a similar thing to what they're saying in that moment?
It's a bit of both. It's a bit of both. Especially in the practice that we do, we're usually focusing on the breath, or we're trying to observe the sensations on the body, and developing equanimity and an understanding of impermanence towards those sensations. And so when something unpleasant happens, so like, my, one of the kids breaks my favorite, teacup or something like that, the initial reaction is like, right? And if I'm not paying attention, it'll come out as an but I'll quickly catch myself and I'll apologize for that outbreak and express that I made a mistake. So I'm showing some humility, I'm showing forgiveness, I'm showing understanding that they're just a kid, or it could have been an adult who would make that mistake. If I'm, even more on top of it, I'll be able to observe those really unpleasant sensations arise in me, understanding that these are sensations of aversion, of hatred, of repulsion, and understanding that they're going to pass away.
Okay.
And then it's just a teacup, or it's just like a book, or it's just, whatever it is. It's just, doesn't really matter. Like, these things are just objects that come and go.
Okay. So it's on two levels. It's like the understanding of the anicca, the rising and passing away.
That's right.
Applies to the teacup, because it's just an object that was once dirt and will continue to be dirt, but also applies to the emotions that are arising in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, like, the emotion, I know the anger will pass. And if I, on the other hand, like if I see my child getting really angry or frustrated, um, rather than getting so caught up in his or her anger or frustration, I'm also aware that that is going to pass as well. So I
Yeah.
just want to, I'll just be there and accompany my child during that, little storm, that turmoil that's arising, because I know it's going to pass away. And the more I could stay calm with them while they're in their storm, they'll feel more secure, they'll feel more safe, and they'll feel more trusting to open up and share their inner lives with us. So, and when that happens, I can develop empathy for them, and they can even develop empathy for us.
Wow. I love that. I know I'm going to listen to that multiple times. It's tough. I mean, I totally resonate with what you're saying, Michelle. I've been meditating for 15 years. Honestly, I don't feel like I've made that much progress. And I've been parenting for 4 years. And it's just so easy to get totally triggered. And even with my not very successful background in meditation, I do feel like it's helped me, and that I would be totally lost without nonviolent communication and meditation and these ways of uh, trying to skillfully navigate the incredible intensity and pressure when a little version of yourself is being a total jerk. Yeah, very, very challenging.
Yeah, I think they're our greatest teachers.
Oh, yeah. But a lot of it is having compassion for yourself. A lot of us tend to beat ourselves up. This is a pattern I notice in a lot of people, including myself, ourselves, is that, we get frustrated with ourselves. We tend to beat ourselves up when we do the wrong thing or think the wrong thing. But, just taking a step back and developing some self-compassion and forgiveness is really helpful. And that makes the rest of the process much easier.
Yeah, well said. Thinking about pilgrimage a little bit, uh, maybe tell me a little bit about the pilgrimages that you've done. But really, what I want to ask you, I'm going to just blow the end of the story here. I want to know what you think the benefits of pilgrimage are for people, regardless of whether they're at Camino de Santiago or the Buddha or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a funny story how we got into pilgrimage. We were in India. We had actually just come. We had sat a 1 month retreat in Jaipur in Western India, and then we did a tour around Burma with SM Goenka. And we came back, and Paul and Susan had just come out of their retreat, and we were chatting. And then a man named Carl Franz had come by. He wrote a really well-known travel guide to Mexico called People's Guide to Mexico. And so Paul and Susan introduced us to Carl, and we were all talking. And then a Burmese gentleman approached us, and he knew Paul and Carl. And he knew Carl was a travel guide and a travel writer, and he wrote this famous book. And he said, "So Carl, when are you going to write a guidebook for India?" And Carl says, "I'm not going to write a guidebook to India. I don't know anything about India. I just come and meditate here, and then I leave." And then Paul looks at us and he says, "Why don't you guys write the guidebook to India?" And we said, "Okay." And and I guess we were just telling them about
very naive.
Yeah, so naive. And so the next 7 years were spent, researching and writing this book. And whether there's an energy there, a sacred energy because of the places themselves, or it's the energy that all the pilgrims are bringing to the place, who knows? But we found these places special for whatever the reason was. And we enjoyed meditating, we enjoyed interacting with locals, and we enjoyed meeting pilgrims from all these other countries and doing all these sorts of practices that were way different from what we were doing. And it just, the diversity of thinking and practice, but all rooted in this devotion to the Dharma was really special. And then, and then when writing the book, we wanted to convey that sort of love and devotion and gratitude that we had towards the Buddha and towards India. And so that was a really special experience for us. And then in 2013, Parayati, who is the publisher of the book, reached out to us asking if we would want to guide a pilgrimage for Vipassana meditators. So so we agreed. I agreed. Michelle had to stay home with the kids. We couldn't both leave for 3 weeks or a month. And so on that inaugural pilgrimage, everybody on that pilgrimage were, very senior meditators. That first pilgrimage was by invitation only. And it was so wonderful to travel with all these senior meditators and meditate deeply in all these places. We would be sitting 3-4 hours a day at all these wonderful places. And we'd be reading stories from the book and having great, spiritual conversations, and just, it was a really strong sense of fraternity. And coming back to this idea of the hero, the hero's journey, for example, there's this idea, and it also applies to the pilgrim. There's a man named Van Gennep who wrote about, the pilgrim's journey, which is similar to the hero's journey, where, you leave your home, you enter into this liminal state, this liminal place, you're betwixt and between, and you have some sort of transformative experience, usually with other people, because all of your status, your stature, your past is all vanished. You're all sort of, wearing simple clothes, and you're eating the same foods, and your past status doesn't really matter. And then so you all have this sort of, transformative experience in one way or another, and then you go home as a changed person. And that I found really beautiful, because here I was, the youngest person in this group, the only person who wasn't a meditation teacher in the group, yet we were all like equals. We were all brothers and sisters, just sharing. It was very humbling. There's a deep sense of humility and trust and love for each other. And then after that experience, like everybody had a really great time. And because there was a lot of very senior meditators on that tour, naturally they shared their good experiences with the people from wherever they came from. And by the way, we were 30 people on that pilgrimage from 14 different countries. So that was amazing in itself. There were Americans and Canadians and Indians and Burmese and Mexicans and French and Germans and Swiss, and we were from Chinese. We were from all over the place. Taiwan, Israel, Australia, Iran. It was great. And so right after that, the word spread, and then the next pilgrimage that we organized, I think it was full in 72 hours.
Wow.
Which says something. This is there's it costs whatever it costs, a couple of $1,000 or $1,500. You're committing to go to India for 3 weeks, and it was full in 72 hours with a long waiting list. Today it's not the case. Usually the pilgrimages are almost full, but
there's a few per year
now. There's like 3 or 4 per year in India. So obviously there isn't the same, there's still a high demand, but there isn't the same, rush to get your spot. And obviously I only lead the pilgrimages once every couple of years now, because I'm teaching, and I've managed to get a sabbatical every second winter through my work. So in that sabbatical year, usually I spend lots of time with the family, but I also find time to meditate and lead a pilgrimage. And then we have another friend of ours from Germany who does the rest of the pilgrimages. So yeah, it's just it's a really beautiful experience and powerful experience, and so vastly different from what we're doing here, because like here we're so intensely rooted in the local. We're working the land, we're in touch with our forest, we're in touch with the immediate community. We're in this very small, radius ecosystem. And then I go, on pilgrimage. I'm in India. It's like the total opposite of local. It's completely global. I'm with people from all these different countries, speaking all these different languages. And it's, along the Buddhist route, and there's so many different types of foods and clothing and dress and attitudes. So it's fascinating how I have the opportunity to weave in and out of these, hyper local and hyper global experiences.
I mean, to me, it's just another example of your, both of your amazing ability to maintain balance, right? It's just totally integrated. Well, maybe one more thing. This is the part where I say, if there's anything you want to preach or suggest, or any little life hack or tweak or suggestion you have that could really positively impact the lives of the people who are listening, this is a space for you to offer it.
That's a tough one. I'm just really grateful that we spent our 20s traveling, getting an education, establishing our meditation practice, broadening our mind, learning about many different ways to live, so that we could bring that all back and integrate it into our life design. But as far as, I don't know, I think I would say everyone should take some time in their life to retreat and take a step back and take stock. And I always find that when I come back to my life after, I'm a better person, I'm a better wife, I'm a better mother, and to allow each other to go and take that time is really beneficial to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Same thing. I think Michelle put it quite nicely. Really take the time to give yourself, the rest that's needed. We live in such a tense world, especially with the pandemic. There's so much stress, there's so much tension, there's mistrust, there's all sorts of conspiracy theories. And especially these days, with this kind of pandemic, and then, there's wars going on. Look what we're seeing in Burma, Myanmar right now. Take the time to look inside. Take the time to learn how to meditate. Life goes by very quickly. And when you take the time to understand your mind, you can cultivate more empathy, more joy, more gratitude. For us, it's all about gratitude. We've had so much privilege in our lives, whether it was in terms of education, whether it was in terms of having access to resources. We won the lottery being born and raised in Canada, where we've had our education taken care of, our healthcare taken care of. And so it's very easy to just be unappreciative. But for us, really cultivating that gratitude and appreciation is the key. And I think that's the key to our survival as a human species. Sometimes, we do get a little down when we see the current state of affairs in terms of the climate and political unrest and social instability. A lot of it stems from just deep greed and hatred and a lack of imagination and a lack of appreciation. So if you can counter those things, greed through generosity, hatred through loving kindness and compassion, towards others and for oneself, and just recognizing that all of us want to be happy, none of us want to suffer. So, and we're all in this together. So the joy and the gratitude and the appreciation really puts things into perspective. And as my doctor once told me, he said, you have two, he actually said this when I married Michelle. He said, you have two options. You can either be right or you can be happy.
Yeah.
So don't believe everything you think. And, the path of happiness and joy is often the easier path.
Thank you, Kory. Thank you, Michelle. And thanks to all our listeners. This has been another episode of 10,000 Heroes. Check out the show notes at 10kh.show for more information, including links and references to things that Kory and Michelle talked about in their work and how they do their farming. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you at the next episode.